The wind howled through the cracked shutters of the old parlor, carrying dust and sorrow with it. Clara's fingers trembled as she threaded the needle one last time. Each stitch she made into the ivory silk was like sealing a promise she'd made to her mama before they put her in the ground. Her mother's wedding dress. It was all she had left that felt pure, that felt hers. Then the door slammed. Hoyt Braxton staggered in, boots thudding heavy on the wooden floor, reeking of rot gut and regret. His gambler's hat was tilted low, hiding bloodshot eyes that never softened, even for family. "Well, now," he slurred, eyeing the dress. "Ain't that a pretty piece of fabric? Shame it ain't worth more on your back than it is in a saloon window." Clara stood. "I ain't selling it. Not to you, not to anyone." He laughed. A sick, slithering sound. Then, faster than thunder, he yanked the knife from his belt and slashed the dress clean down the middle, the blade hissing through silk like it had waited years to do so. "No!" she gasped, lunging forward, but he backhanded her across the mouth. She hit the wall hard, the world spinning. "That's for talking back. Don't forget who feeds you." Blood pooled in her mouth. She wiped it, staring up at the man who used to call himself kin. He leaned close, breath thick with whiskey and venom. "Your mama's dead. Ain't no man comin' for a broken thing like you, but I know a few who'll pay." Her voice cracked, but it still held fire. "You'll burn for this." He grinned, stepping back. "Then I best bring matches." She bolted. Barefoot, clutching the torn dress to her chest, she ran past the table of sneering outlaws, out into the cold night, heart thudding like war drums. Behind her, Hoyt chuckled and took another swig. "She'll be back," he muttered. "They always come back when the desert's done with them." But Clara didn't look back. Not once. And out there, somewhere past the canyon and the windmill, fate waited. And so did fire. The desert didn't care if you were young, innocent, or broken. By midday, the sun pressed down like judgment. Clara staggered forward, feet bleeding, dress clinging to her like a dying ghost. Her lips were cracked, her breath shallow. Every step was a prayer, or a curse. She hadn't eaten, hadn't drunk, just ran, through thornbush and stone, through heat and memory. The torn dress dragged behind her like a wedding that never was. Her knees gave out near a dry creek bed, and she collapsed onto the sand, dust clouding around her. Above, vultures circled. She blinked up at them, half dreaming. Maybe they were angels. Maybe they were waiting. Then came the riders. Two of Hoyt's men crested the hill, grinning like devils in Sunday suits. One wore a snake-hide vest. The other had a scar that split his mouth permanently sideways. "Well, well," Snakehide drawled, dismounting. "Looks like the boss was right. Little Dove couldn't fly far." Clara tried to crawl, but her arms buckled. She screamed when Scar dragged her up by the hair. "Save it," he spat. "Ain't no one out here gonna hear you." They tied her to a rusted windmill post, hands bound tight with dry rope, mouth bloodied from the fight. The windmill creaked above her, each groan of the metal like a death clock ticking down. A rusty tin can of water sat 6 feet away, close enough to see, far enough to torture. "This is my vengeance," Scar whispered with a smile, echoing Hoyt's words. "You humiliated a man. This is what pride gets you." They rode off, laughing, dust trailing behind their horses like smoke from hell. Clara struggled against the rope, wrists tearing open, breath rasping in the dry air. Hours passed. The sun dragged shadows across the sand like slow knives. She began to fade. Her head slumped, her eyes dimmed. The world went white at the edges. Then, hoofbeats, slow, heavy, steady. A figure approached through the shimmering heat, broad-shouldered, silhouetted by the dying sun. A wide hat, a long coat, a horse that moved like thunder tamed. Clara tried to lift her head, tried to speak. Only a whisper escaped. "Please, help." And then everything went black. The world returned in flickers. First, the soft hiss of a kettle. Then, the dry crackle of firewood. Her eyes fluttered open to lamplight glowing amber, painting the walls of a small cabin with warmth she hadn't known in years. She lay on a simple cot, wrapped in wool that smelled faintly of horses and tobacco. Her wrists were bandaged, clean. Her lips were moist, her throat no longer on fire. A dog barked once, low, cautious. Then came the man. Boots on old pine boards. A weathered hand pushed open the cabin door and stepped inside. Elias Granger, gray-bearded, built like a barn post, with the quiet of a man who'd seen too many graves. He glanced at her, not with curiosity, not with pity, but with something steadier. Like respect. "You're awake," he said, setting down a tin cup beside her. "Good." She tried to speak, but coughed. "Drink first," he said, his voice dry as mesquite, but not unkind. She sipped. Water, cold and real. It ran through her like salvation. "I was tied," she rasped, "to a post." "I know." He didn't ask what she'd done to deserve it, didn't ask who sent her there. He just sat by the fire and resumed mending an old saddle, leather creaking between his hands. Outside, wind rustled the trees. The cabin creaked with time, not threat. "Who are you?" she asked. "Rancher," he said simply. "Name's Elias." Silence sat heavy between them, but it wasn't cruel. It was the kind of silence that let a soul breathe again. Later that day, she stepped outside. The ranch stretched wide, fences half-fallen, fields sunburnt and honest. A barn leaned tiredly against the dusk, and horses watched her with soft eyes. She stood barefoot in the dirt, the torn remains of her mother's dress still clinging to her like a wound. But here, no one touched her. No one yelled. Inside the house, Elias poured beans into a pot and lit a lantern. Through the open door, the golden glow reached her face like a promise. For the first time in years, no one was chasing her. And for the first time in her life, she didn't feel alone. The days passed like dust through a screen door. Slow, warm, honest. Clara stayed quiet, but her hands stayed busy. She patched a ripped shirt of Elias's, sewed a saddlebag from scrap hide, even helped mend a fence line with splinters biting her fingers. Her bruises faded, but not her guard. Elias never asked about her past. She never offered. At night, she'd sit on the porch, watching the sky blush purple as the sun dipped behind the hills. The ranch dog curled by her feet. Elias smoked his pipe in silence nearby. There was something sacred in that quiet. Then came the night the wind changed. The dog growled first. A distant horse, then another, hooves echoing like warning drums across the plain. A black hat appeared at the gate, tilted low, coat flapping in the wind like a buzzard's wing. Hoyt Braxton, alive, grinning, and unrepentant. "Well, I'll be," he called out, reins loose in his hand. "You've been hiding my girl, Elias." Elias stepped off the porch, boots heavy in the dust. He didn't blink, didn't flinch. "She ain't yours," he said. Hoyt smiled like a snake. "She's got debts. You keepin' her, you buyin' them too." Clara stepped out behind Elias, fists clenched. "You got no claim on me," she said. Hoyt's grin soured. "Ain't what the law says. Ain't what the boys think either. You got one night to change your mind. After that, well, ranches burn easy." He turned his horse slow, dramatic, coat whipping behind him as he vanished back into the night. Clara stood frozen. "He'll come back?" Elias nodded once. "I know." He turned and handed her a key. "Lock the barn, bolt the doors, keep the lantern close." "What about you?" Elias checked the rifle by the door and said, calm as dusk, "I'll be waiting." Inside, Clara sat at the kitchen table, staring at her shaking hands. Outside, the wind rose and the black night swallowed the trail behind Hoyt's retreat. But in the lantern's light, Elias stood like a wall, unmoved. The past had come knocking. But the ranch was no longer empty. The next morning dawned cold and dry, like the desert itself held its breath. The barn still stood, the fences were untouched. But Clara knew better. Hoyt wasn't bluffing. He was waiting for the right hour to strike, and when he did, he'd bring more than words. She and Elias rode into town just past sunrise, hooves tapping steady on cracked earth. Clara's eyes scanned every window, every saloon door. Folks looked away, the kind of silence that only comes from fear or guilt. Sheriff Buck Tillman sat on the porch of the jailhouse, a tin badge dulled with years, his limp evident as he stood. "Well now," he muttered, tipping his hat. "Ain't seen you in a while, Elias." Elias nodded. "She's got a name, Buck, and a right to be heard." Clara stepped forward, voice steady but raw. "Hoyt Braxton tried to sell me, beat me, left me tied to a post to die." The sheriff scratched his chin. "You got witnesses?" Clara's jaw clenched. "He confessed to me." "That ain't proof, darlin'," Buck said, slow and tired. "Especially not out here, where the Braxtons own more friends than cattle." Clara's voice rose. "You'd let him ride free? After what he's done?" Tillman looked away. "Law's thin out here. Real justice. It rides slow." Silence settled like a coffin lid. Elias turned to Clara, calm but firm. "Then we don't wait for justice. We make ready." They rode back under a sky gone gray. At the ranch, Elias opened the old shed behind the barn. Inside, a rusted chest. Inside that, a rifle wrapped in canvas, oiled but unused. Clara Saint, hard at it. "You ever fired one?" Elias asked. "No." "Then it's time you learned." He showed her how to brace it, how to breathe before the pull, how to look a man in the eye and not flinch. Her aim was shaky, her hands still shook, but the fire behind her ribs, that was steady. By sundown she was hitting tin cans off fence posts. Elias looked on, silent. The dog barked once, a warning. Clara lowered the rifle, dust in her throat. "Do you think he'll come tonight?" Elias didn't answer. He just lit the lantern and said, "We'll be ready if he does." Thunder rolled across the plains like the footsteps of giants. The sky blackened and wind whipped dry dust into Clara's eyes as she crouched behind the barn wall. Her hands gripped the rifle tight, knuckles white, heart hammering like hooves on hard earth. Elias moved silently beside her, long coat flapping, shotgun slung over one shoulder, eyes scanning the shadows. The first torch appeared, bobbing like a flickering demon. Hoyt Braxton and 5 of his men crested the hill, shouting, laughter rough as gravel. They threw a flaming bundle through the barn window. Hay erupted into fire with a hiss, smoke curling like snakes in the night. Clara stumbled back, coughing, the smell of burning straw stinging her nostrils. Her dress, tattered already, clung to her sweat-soaked skin. Through the smoke she saw the men, faces twisted in hunger and malice. "Come out, little dove," Hoyt yelled. "It's time to finish what we started." Elias stepped forward, boots crunching on gravel. His eyes, gray as storm clouds, met theirs. "Not tonight," he said, voice low and steady. "Not ever again." The first outlaw charged at him, brandishing a knife. Elias fired. The shot rang sharp, echoing across the plains. The man yelped, tumbling from his horse, dust and grit in his face. The others hesitated, unsure. Clara's stomach churned. This was thus, a moment she had feared. Darkness pressing from all sides, fire blazing, the man who had ruined her life grinning in the orange light. A second torch swung near the barn door. Clara fired instinctively, knocking it from a rider's hand. Sparks flew, illuminating the terror and rage in their eyes. The fire roared higher. Smoke wrapped around her like a shroud. She realized she was not running anymore. She was standing. She was fighting. Elias's voice cut through the chaos. "Stay low. Aim true." They moved as one, shadow and shot, firelight and grit. Clara's hands steadied. Every inhale was grit and heat, every heartbeat a drum of defiance. The night seemed endless, a trial of fire, wind, and steel. But somewhere behind the roar of flames and the shouts of men, a distant sound of hooves approached, steady, certain. Hope was coming, and Clara, battered, terrified, and alive, felt for the first time in days that she might just survive the storm. The fire had turned the night sky into a canvas of smoke and embers. Clara crouched behind the charred barn wall, rifle clutched to her chest, sweat stinging her eyes. Her arms ached, her lungs burned, but she refused to blink. She would not let fear claim her tonight. Elias fired again, each shot deliberate, measured. The outlaws flinched under the thunder of gunfire. Sparks danced across their faces, painting them as monsters in the firelight. One fell, rolling into the dirt, while another bolted into the dark, screaming. But Hoyt Braxton remained. He laughed, bloodied, enraged. "You think this ends with me?" he bellowed, knife glinting. "You think a girl and an old man can stop me?" Clara's hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "No. It ends with me." A sudden rumble grew behind them, hooves pounding in rhythm, a sound that made the outlaws pause, their sneers faltering. Through the haze of smoke and flame, Sheriff Buck Tillman and 2 deputies rode into the clearing, pistols drawn, eyes cold with justice. "Hoyt Braxton," the sheriff barked. "Drop it, or you'll sleep in the ground tonight." Chaos erupted, bullets cracked, ricocheting off barn walls. The remaining outlaws scattered, some fleeing into the darkness, others thrown to the dust by precise sheriff shots. Hoyt tried to backpedal, but the deputies cut him off. Clara felt her chest heave as she stepped from behind the barn, rifle still in hand. Hoyt's eyes met hers. Hatred, disbelief, and fear tangled together. He lunged, but the sheriff tackled him, the world exploding into dust and shouts. Clara lowered the rifle, shaking. Her eyes scanned the battlefield of scorched earth, singed hay, and trampled grass. Elias approached, shotgun empty, but stance proud. "You did good," he said quietly, almost a whisper, resting a hand on her shoulder. Clara swallowed, voice raw. "We survived," Elias nodded. "More than that. You fought, you stood, you faced the storm, and it broke against you." Hoyt was cuffed, dragged to the sheriff's horse. His threats dissolved into the cold night air. Clara's lips pressed together as she watched him disappear into the shadows, the firelight fading behind him. For the first time, the ranch felt quiet again, safe, a place where courage had risen from fear and justice had finally found its voice. And Clara knew deep in her bones the night had changed her forever.